season. They also guaranteed the final year of his contract and added another $3 million in incentives. Deebo is not taking their faith in him for granted. Listen up, y'all.
They put this much trust in me to do the things they did for us, my contract. I can't come in here and let them down. They get a motivated Deebo. We're going to get a dog out here. I'm ready to come in here and work. I think these young legs still moving. His body's still working pretty well.
All right, D. Wood, how many teams do you have ahead of Washington in the NFC?
I can name 3 right now. Philly, I think the Philadelphia Eagles, the Los Angeles Rams,
and
the Detroit Lions. I think even with the mass exodus of all these assistant coaches with the Detroit Lions, I still believe in Dan Campbell. Their roster is still elite. And remember, last year, at the end of the year, they were absolutely decimated on defense. They're going to get a lot of those guys back. Yeah. So for me, it's those 3 teams.
And Philly stayed intact, and you could argue that the Rams got even better.
That's right.
Stephen A.?
I don't disagree with you, Woody, but let's not throw shade on the Washington Commanders, all right? You picked up Laramie Tunsil, 5-time Pro Bowl tackle, along with Deebo Samuel, who still got some game left in him. I wouldn't count out Deebo by any stretch of the imagination, particularly considering McLaurin is there and you got a dual threat at the quarterback spot in Daniels. That's number 1. Number 2, we also have to understand that when you say 3 teams are better than them, right? Potentially better than them. We just started talking about the Los Angeles Rams in that light because of how they came on and, most importantly, how they performed in the playoffs against Philadelphia. That was the biggest challenge the Philadelphia Eagles had. But we also have to mention those inclement weather conditions, too, and how that could impede people as well. It was a snowstorm when they were playing against the Philadelphia Eagles. That wasn't the case against the Commanders. That wasn't the case in the Super Bowl as well. So we got to take that into consideration. And last but not least, you're not going to have to play all 3 of those teams. If you got Philly, Detroit, and L.A., if you're the Commanders, you might have to play 2. In most instances, it might only be 1. They won the NFC Championship game last year. I'm not counting Daniels out by any stretch of the imagination. I got Philly, Detroit, L.A. I get you. But it's not like they can't beat Detroit. They did in the playoffs. And it's not like they can't beat the Rams either. So I'd say they're a top 4 team in the NFC. It's interesting.
But I don't think we can go by last year's playoffs, Stephen A., just
it's
because
true.
there's
13 injuries.
So many injuries.
13 guys injured on the defensive side of the ball for Detroit. I know.
Yeah, I don't know if that's a fair comp. All right, we'll keep it rolling here.
That made him famous, and he was his teammate when he said them. And so, Bart, I am told you have things on to get off your chest, things you can't wait.
Greeny, I tried to get here Monday. That's how pissed off I was. I am tired of the disrespect laid at the feet of the defensive players. It's time to set the record straight. And I got a lot of stuff to say.
So who does it start with?
It starts with Joe Burrow, a.k.a. Macaulay Culkin. Listen, we all love the beautiful story. Listen to this. Oh, I love you so much. Get a sack. And tell you what, you got to get the ball back. If one thing the Super Bowl taught us is that offense wins games, defense wins championships. While he's showing all the love to his brothers there, he's spitting in the face of Trey Hendrickson because he should be advocating for him. In what world, D. Wood, do you pay the second receiver on your team before you pay arguably the best defensive end in all of football? Last year, 17.5 sacks, over 57 sacks in over 4 years, and this guy's the 55th highest paid defensive player in football. Disrespectful. Pay the man his money, because at the end of the day, we saw this movie before. I remember it was a time when it was T.J. Houshmandzadeh, and it was Chad Ochocinco, and it was Carson Palmer, and they went nowhere. And eventually, Carson Palmer asked for a trade. That's what we headed for. I got a lot more to say about that, but I know I got to move on.
No, but let me get it. Did you agree with that? Do you think that they should have taken care of Hendrickson? Maybe they still wound up taking care of Hendrickson. We'll see. They gave him the permission to seek a trade. I don't think that's really gone anywhere so far. We're going to get Fowler in here a little bit later, so we'll ask him. If they don't take care of Hendrickson, if for whatever reason he winds up gone, did they pay the wrong guy?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's a travesty. Like, you're talking about one of the best defensive players in the league. Like, here's the thing. I don't want to hear Joe Burrow or anybody on offense cry or complain anymore. It is all on you now.
Yep.
Like, it's all on you. Y'all got all these weapons, but then got a wet paper bag on defense. So don't say anything come the season.
Okay, that's the first thing that you're aggravated about. What's the next thing you're aggravated
about? This hurts me because it comes from my hometown.
Wait. And now, you don't have to, because this segment is on and popping. Bart Scott, Jeremy Fowler joining the program. Gentlemen, good morning to you. J-Bone, the Bengals finalized contract extensions with Jamar and T early this week. Now the focus shifts to Trey Hendrickson, who's also looking for an extension. Where do things stand between the two sides?
Gee, I'm told the talks between the Bengals and Trey Hendrickson are quiet right now. They tried to reignite things last week on a contract extension, talked for a few days, exchanged some potential offers, couldn't reach an agreement as of now. Also, the Bengals have not shown an eagerness to trade Trey Hendrickson, despite some clear interest from teams looking for a pass rusher at a premium spot. And so right now, this is at a stagnation point. The Bengals do want to pay Hendrickson. They've made him contract offers, but they are not, in the eyes of the player, commensurate with his skill set as a guy who has 35 sacks over the last 2 years. The pass rush market has exploded well above $35 million per year right now. So that's the rub right now. The team is going to continue to try. Their goal all along has been to lock up all three stars: Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, Trey Hendrickson.
Yeah, but they prioritize signing of Jamar Chase and T. Higgins. And you're paying your second receiver $28 million when you have a guy that has led the league in sacks, and he has 57 sacks over 4 years. I've seen this movie before with the Bengals with T.J. Houshmandzadeh and Chad Ochocinco. In this division, you have to play defense, and nobody's been better at the position, not even Myles Garrett over the last 2 years, and Trey Hendrickson. And last year they put a Band-Aid on the wound last year, thinking that he would have a down year or the market wouldn't explode. And this is what happens. The Bengals haven't prioritized defense, and that's why they lost players like Jesse Bates, because they wait to the last minute to pay them, hoping that they have a down year. And now Trey Hendrickson has all the leverage. And them trying to say that they're trying to trade him is a joke, because they put a poison pill expecting a first-round draft pick when the team that acquires him knows that they have to pay him $30 to $35 million. And when Michael Parsons gets paid, the market's going to explode even more.
All right, Bart, so sticking on that, and you obviously want your guys to have your back within that locker room, but can a point be made that, listen, the Bengals defense was not that great last season with Hendrickson leading the league in sacks, so going out there and trying to get a return for him instead of paying him, because obviously the defense wasn't that great without him, is that something that the Bengals can stay claiming?
Well, you don't get better by getting rid of your best player. I would argue that Trey Hendrickson over the last 5 years has been the second or third best player on the team. They have a problem brewing, because eventually Orlando Brown Jr. is going to want to get paid as well. And what happens is when you pay all your players at the top end of the market, you can't build a team around them. It's not a Trey Hendrickson fault. Last year, 17.5 sacks, over 57 sacks in over 4 years, and this guy's the 55th highest paid defensive player in football. Disrespectful. Pay the man his money, because at the end of the day, we saw this movie before. I remember it was a time when it was T.J. Houshmandzadeh, and it was Chad Ochocinco, and it was Carson Palmer, and they went nowhere. And eventually, Carson Palmer asked for a trade. That's what we headed for. I got a lot more to say about that, but I know I got to move on.
No, but let me get it. Did you agree with that? Do you think that they should have taken care of him? Maybe they still wound up taking care of him.
The Cincinnati Bengals find themselves at a pivotal moment as they navigate the complexities of roster management and financial commitment to their core players. After securing long-term deals for star wide receivers Jamar Chase and T. Higgins, the attention now shifts to defensive standout Trey Hendrickson. However, negotiations appear to be at an impasse. The Bengals have made offers, but from the player's perspective, they fall short of the value he commands on the open market. In an era where elite pass rushers are commanding upwards of $35 million per season, Hendrickson, who has registered a staggering 35 sacks over the past 2 seasons, understandably expects compensation in line with his production. Yet, Cincinnati remains hesitant, creating a standoff that could have significant ramifications for the franchise. The Bengals' approach to roster construction has drawn criticism, particularly from those who believe their reluctance to prioritize defense has already cost them key contributors in recent years. The departure of safety Jesse Bates III, a vital piece of their secondary, serves as a prime example. Rather than proactively securing their defensive stars, the Bengals have developed a habit of waiting until the last moment, hoping for a market downturn or decline in performance. That strategy backfired with Bates, and they now risk a similar outcome with Hendrickson. To complicate matters further, Cincinnati has reportedly placed a first-round pick as the asking price for a trade, effectively shutting down any realistic discussions given the significant financial commitment any acquiring team would have to make. For those questioning whether retaining Hendrickson should be a priority, the numbers speak for themselves. Over the last 5 seasons, he has arguably been the second or third most impactful player on the roster. His production rivals that of Myles Garrett, yet he remains criminally underpaid relative to his peers. The Bengals' defense may not have been elite last season, but removing their best pass rusher would only exacerbate their issues rather than solve them. The AFC North is a division built on physicality, elite defensive play, and dominant pass rushers. Baltimore, Cleveland, and Pittsburgh have all invested heavily in their front sevens. If the Bengals want to remain competitive, they cannot afford to part ways with a player who has been their most consistent defensive force. Beyond Hendrickson, another storm is brewing in Cincinnati's locker room. Offensive tackle Orlando Brown Jr., a key piece of their offensive line, will soon be looking for a payday of his own. The Bengals are quickly approaching a financial crossroads where paying their top stars at premium positions may come at the cost of their overall roster depth. This dilemma is nothing new in Cincinnati. History has shown that the franchise has struggled to balance offensive firepower with defensive stability. The early 2000s Bengals, featuring Chad Johnson, T.J. Houshmandzadeh, and Carson Palmer, put up prolific offensive numbers but lacked the defensive support to be a true contender. Now, the Bengals find themselves in a similar predicament, investing heavily in offensive weapons while potentially neglecting the other side of the ball. Joe, Burrow, Chase, and Higgins form one of the most lethal offensive trios in the NFL. But if the Bengals fail to maintain a competitive defense, they risk following the footsteps of teams that have tried to win shootouts every week only to come up short when it matters most. The old adage remains true. Offense wins games, but defense wins championships. Just look at the Kansas City Chiefs, who, despite their offensive firepower, leaned heavily on their defense during their most recent Super Bowl runs. If Cincinnati wants to compete for a Lombardi trophy, they cannot afford to mishandle Hendrickson's situation. A premier edge rusher in his prime does not come around often, and letting him walk or forcing a trade over financial constraints would send a troubling message to the locker room. It's not just about Hendrickson. It's about the precedent being set. If one of the best defensive players in football isn't a priority, what does that say to the rest of the team? These decisions define franchises, and right now, the Bengals are at crossroads. How they handle this will dictate whether they remain a legitimate contender or slide back into mediocrity.